about 8 ounce. That'll do, won't it? Right, well, we're here today at Lindholm Lakes, which is my local commercial. It is absolutely Baltic, but you know, these conditions, when it's as cold as this, keep these carp down, and luckily it gives us the opportunity to fish for a few of these perch in winter. I've had 2 fish in 2 casts. This is the biggest of the 2. It's a beautiful fish, fantastic condition, and hopefully 1 or 2 bigger fish come along. Water's so cold, it's unbelievable. Right, so as I've explained earlier, I'm here on my local commercial perch fishing. You know, these lakes are great. The summertime they're full of carp, F1s, and people get massive weights. But like a lot of predators, these perch thrive on neglect. And all the way through the summer, when people are fishing for these big weights of carp, they're not catching these perch. And this time of year, I mean, it is absolutely freezing today. This time of year is perfect to come and target these perch because the water temperature drops. You know, it's cool on the night. It puts a lot of these carp and F1s down, which then enables you to come and fish for these perch specifically. And you know, these commercials up and down country, old big perch. If you've got a commercial near you, sort of from now till it starts to warm up again, probably March time, is an ideal time to target them. They're not particularly difficult to fish for because they never get fished for, and it's quite a simple method to use. And you know, your local commercial might have never thrown a big perch up, but if you actually go and fish for one, it could hold a surprise or 2. I've not really fished many commercials that don't hold perch unless they're relatively new ones. So if you've got a commercial near you, it's really worth going down and giving it a go and targeting these perch. Right, so that's the second sort of half-decent perch we've had. It's proven a little bit difficult actually. I had a couple of bites on prawn, that first decent fish on prawn, and then we went probably about 40 minutes without a bite, put a lobworm on and had this one first cast. So hopefully I'll stick with the lobworm for a little bit longer, but it might just be one of those days today we have to keep chopping and changing. What is quite noticeable is these fish are coming more or less within minutes of casting out, and I think with how cold the water is and how clear it is, I think they're actually watching that bait fall through the water. Once it's been at the bottom for a while, you're not getting a bite. However, when you lift and drop it, more often than not you do get a bite not long afterwards. So we'll stick with it. I think it's going to be one of those days where we have to keep chopping and changing baits to keep bites coming, but as long as we're catching perch like this, it won't be a bad day despite how cold it is. Right, the bait choice today is really simple. I've got 2 sort of big hook baits to try and deter some of these smaller fish and these F1s, and then I've got a loose feed to try and draw a few silvers in. So the loose feed, although I will occasionally use these on a hook if I'm really struggling, I just buy a pint of saw red maggots and I just feed these very little but quite often. Just feed 4 or 5 in a swim, just keep them coming in. Does 2 things. You can draw perch in, but what I'm aiming to do with this loose feed is draw a few of these silvers in. These commercials are full of tiny little skimmers, tiny little roach, things like that, and by drawing those little silvers in, brings those predator fishing behind them. So they're just predominantly a loose feed, although if I'm struggling I will drop to a smaller hook and use those on hook. And then my 2 main hook baits, sort of classic perch baits really, you won't go nowhere without them. One of them's some big old lobworms, and I'll fish these either a single one on hook, or I'll fish them in halves, and I'll show you why I do that a little bit later on. And then the other one is king prawns. It's a whole king prawn. You know, it's a big old bait. You know, that's going to deter a lot of those smaller fish, a lot of those silvers, and perch absolutely love them. Now, there's two things I do with these king prawns and it's a strange one really. I don't know why, but perhaps somebody can tell me why. Some venues I seem to catch better on the cooked ones, and then other venues I catch better on these raw ones. This one in particular, Lindholm today, I've also done a lot better on raw prawns. I don't really know why that is, but when I start fishing a venue for the first time, I usually end up bringing both and then working out which one you get the most amount of bites from. But predominantly, for some reason, these raw prawns seem to outfish the cooked ones. But there's a couple of local lakes near me which are the other way around, and I've caught a lot more on cooked ones than have them raw for some reason. And again, lobworms, there's a lake near me where I just can't get a bite on prawns. Yeah, I catch all my fish on lobworms. And then other lakes I've fished, I can't catch on lobworms, but I catch on prawns. I think I tend to catch more on prawns in commercial venues and more on natural venues on lobworms. Whether it's things like fish meal, ground baits, now they get fed up here, I don't know. But I tend to fetch prawns a lot more to commercials, but I don't take prawns to natural venues. I just fish lobworms. But either way, I just loose feed red maggots over the top. Come on, take it. Is it really? Isn't it? Look at it, wallowing, come on. Oh, yes. Oh, that's a relief, isn't it? I was getting a bit of a panic on when I hook them in case up comes out of them. Oh, love hooking them. Even better when the bottom of the landing net. That is a good fish. After a few sort of half decent fish, bit of patience has paid off, and we have got one of the slightly better ones from here. Again, coming really quickly after I dropped that worm in. It's not the biggest one, but it's certainly the biggest one of the day so far. Cracking bite, and again it came to that little method of lifting and dropping that I spoke about earlier, and a lobworm cut in two pieces. Put up a cracking fight. It is freezing cold. It's like holding a little block of ice, but it just shows in these conditions these fish are still willing to feed, and if you try and find out what they want, they're always catchable. What I find sometimes is if I hook a full lobworm on, I get a lot of false bites because I think those fish have an opportunity to sort of grab half of the worm and swim off with it. So what I've started doing is, and again it's it's probably something that a lot of people do, but some people might not know it, is actually cut the lobworm in half, which gives me a smaller bait, but still a big bait. Hook the two halves where I've cut them, put a little maggot on, because I'm using a Barbel sucks, because that's the fishery rules on here, stop it from coming off. And what I tend to find is, because it's still a big bait, it still deters those small fish. And by hooking it through the cut ends, the fish sort of homing on that end first, because that's the end where all sort of the juices and all the flavours coming out. So I don't get those kind of runaway bites where my float's just slowly being pulled through my swim. The bites are much more positive, and you do tend to hook a lot more fish than you do if you just fish a normal full worm on hook. Did it again, like on drop. Came again, just seconds, just seconds after dropping it in. There you go. It's nice and angry. It's got its fin up. Well, I'd be angry, I think, if somebody dragged me out of where I live. Rod nearly fell over then. It's a nice little angry fish. Right, so we've already spoke about baits. I've already mentioned that I use king prawns as well as lobworms. But what I do with my king prawns is, a lot of these commercials have maximum hook size limits on them. So sometimes the size of hook that they use can be a little bit too small for something like a whole king prawn, you know, something as big as that. So all I tend to do is to try and sort of make them a little bit smaller. To go with the smaller hooks you have to use sometimes is I just cut that thick end off with a pair of scissors. Obviously don't go to waste, I chop it up and use it as my loose feed. And then that just leaves like a small little tail piece there. That's still a big bait, you know, it still deters a lot of small fish, but it's not so big that it doesn't sit right on such a small hook. I mean, a lot of these venues have sort of size 10, size 12 hook limits, and if you fish a great big king prawn like that on such a small hook, there's not enough of the hook inside of the bait to hold in these fish's mouths. So if you have got a hook size limit on your fishery, just think about trimming your baits down a little bit. They don't always have to be as they come in the bag. I do like to trim mine down and use them on a slightly smaller hook. Something else I do with them, which I don't know if it works or not, to be honest with you, but it does add a lot of confidence in my fishing, is I just get a handful of prawns out of freezer the night before, just stick them in a little bait tub, and I give them a good soaking in this Absolute fish oil from Sonobaits. It just really sort of increases the smell of those prawns, gives them a little coating. When you drop them in water, you can see the oils and everything coming off, and I just think it's another little attractor to a perch. I don't know if it works or not, to be honest with you, but it gives me the confidence, and a lot of times in fishing that's the key that you need to catch fish. I was trying to scoop on for someone to pop up. Look at that sort of size, isn't there? So we just had this other perch. I've had it on a lobworm again. I do something slightly different how I up my lobworms. It's not a bad fish. It's like holding a block of ice. It is freezing cold. So the gear I'm using to use these perch, it's just really just a standard float setup. I've got a 13-foot float rod. I've got a 3000 size reel. This is the Axis 2. Loaded up with 6 pound main line. I've got a semi-loaded waggler on. Again, I like to use float stops instead of shot at either side of my float, so I can continually keep changing depth if I'm not getting bites. So I prefer to use a semi-loaded float between two float stops because it causes less damage to your line when you're moving it up and down. So coming down that 6 pound main line, I've just got a bit of a spread out. This is 5 number 6 shots, just spread out in sort of bottom third at line. Again, we're not looking to catch fish on the drop. We're not using like a fine maggot or caster presentation, so it don't really matter how slow that bait falls through the water. It's a big old bait. It's a lobworm or a prawn, so it kind of sinks straight to the bottom anyway. I've then got a little float hook length attachment. It's just one of our little hook length swivels there, with a little bit of silicone over to protect that little hook. Down to a 4 pound hook length. I always like to start off on 4, and that's the reason why I use 6, because I can go up to 6 if I need to be. But to be honest with you, 4 pounds more than enough to land any sort of perch you're going to get in here. And the hook size, purely depending on fishery rules. I use the biggest hook I can get away with, depending on fishery rules. Because again, I'm using a big old bait. The sort of the perfect hook that I use for my perch fishing for lobworms and prawns is something like a super steel all-rounder. You know, it's quite fine wire, really strong, needle sharp, and that big old wide gape that it has helps those baits sit on it perfectly. Well, I might as well reel in there. Ooh, I thought I had. Oh! See that? Eh? Oh, that were a perch. That should have just struck into that, shouldn't I? Right, well, I think that's it. We've hung on till dusk. Didn't get another fish to show you before we went. But it's absolutely freezing cold now. But we've had a few, you know, showing some different baits to use, some little techniques. It's not been a bad day after all, to be fair. It's better than being at home. However, I'm that cold now, that's where I want to go right now. So I'm going to get packed in, get myself off home, get something to eat. I hope you've enjoyed the video and you've picked 1 or 2 tips up, and we'll see you on the bank again sometime.